In 1874, the German composer Richard Wagner completed a monumental piece of work that had taken him over a quarter of a century to write, The Ring of the Nibelung. This gigantic saga, a music drama lasting over 15 hours from start to finish, is far and away the most ambitious undertaking by one person in the history of European music. Wagner didn't just write the music, he wrote the text as well. The Ring cycle gave expression to a whole political and cultural movement, German nationalism. It couldn't have been written at any other time or in any other country. The Ring totally redrew the map of 19th century music, and it cast its spell on other art forms as well. Wagner was a titan, but there was a dark undercurrent to his work. He remains one of the most controversial figures in music history. In 1874, humanity seemed to be reaching the zenith of its powers. All over Europe, a feeling of confidence and optimism was summed up by great monuments to the industrial age, like the awesome St. Pancras Station in London. It symbolized a mood of prosperity, a belief in the limitless possibilities of progress, and mankind's increasing mastery of technology. Industry was growing ever more powerful. Scientific and technological advances were following one after another at a dizzying rate. Man seemed to be near to taming the forces of nature. And yet, under the confident surface lay a deep layer of pessimism. In the shadow of the fine buildings, industrial Europe was a viper's nest of poverty, slums, and squalor that never seemed to change. Karl Marx was already preaching that revolution was the only answer. Man's attitude to religion was also changing. Charles Darwin's startling theories about evolution seemed to call into question the very existence of a god. To many writers and artists, mankind seemed to be adrift in a bleak, brutal, meaningless world. All the turmoil of the time is reflected in The Ring. Although it's set in the mists of European prehistory, Wagner's real purpose in writing it was to sum up the spirit of his own age. The Ring cycle also reflected the violent contradictions of Wagner's own personality, one of the most extreme in the whole history of music. It's hard to say which had more drama in it, Wagner's life or his operas. He certainly behaved like a character in a romantic novel. He was deliberately elusive and mysterious as to his true parentage, and he invented for himself a role as a tortured maestro whose every will and whim had to be met for the creative muse to be unleashed. With his love of scented baths, satin undergarments and Venetian tapestries, Wagner came on like a latter-day Cleopatra. But the absurdly extravagant, luxury-loving man who completed the Ring cycle in 1874 was a very different one from the one who'd started it 25 years earlier. The young Wagner was a fiery, revolutionary socialist. Wagner was a member of a generation of radicals who believed that only revolution could change society for the better. In 1848, they put their ideas into action. A wave of armed uprisings swept across Europe. The following year, the composer was caught up in a revolution himself. Wagner played a significant part in a violent uprising in his hometown here of Dresden. His job was to keep watch in the bell tower of the Kreuzkirche, reporting on the movements of the Prussian army sent to defeat the revolution. These dramatic events were to affect the rest of his life. When the uprising collapsed, Wagner managed to escape with a price on his head. His less lucky colleagues, who were captured, were sentenced to death, later commuted to life imprisonment. Wagner was unable to return to Germany for the next 11 years. In exile, Wagner decided that fundamental social change would be brought about not by revolution, but by opera and poetry, and he set about writing plenty of both, and reams of pamphlets and articles about the future role of the arts. Two years after the Dresden uprising, he began work on The Ring. His aim was to create a work that would help to reawaken the national spirit of his native country. Wagner chose misty figures from North Europe's distant past for his all-embracing drama. He was interested in legends and heroes that he felt could be symbolic of the soul of Germany. He sifted through many sources for The Ring, seizing in particular on a medieval German saga about a race of mythical dwarfs, the Nibelungs. He mixed in characters and plotlines from earlier Scandinavian sources and set about moulding them into a coherent whole. But what started out as one opera just grew and grew. By the time he'd finished it, the story spread over 4 operas to take place on 4 separate evenings. The Ring cycle begins with the theft of a precious hoard of gold from the depths of the river Rhine, the rightful property of the Rhine maidens. The thief, Alberich, fashions the gold into a magic ring, which gives him the power to enslave his fellow Nibelungs. In a dark cavern far below the earth, they're set to work mining more and more treasure to make the greedy Alberich richer still. Because of the ring's magic powers, many of the characters in the story want to get their hands on it. And as in any good fairy tale, the greed for golden power leads to corruption and disaster. In the midst of all this, there are tales of incest and exploitation, spells, curses, trickery, and noble self-sacrifice. The cast of characters includes not only gods and dwarfs, but monsters, giants, serpents, and superheroes. And of course, the magnificently apocalyptic Valkyries. The Valkyries are the daughters of Wotan, the head god. His favourite, Brunhilde, is the heroine of the Ring cycle. Their job is to fly around the world picking up dead warriors who'll act, when resurrected, as bodyguards to the god's fortress of Valhalla. So they're sort of airborne undertakers, really. At first sight, the Ring cycle might seem like a very long version of Conan the Barbarian or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the musical. But it is in fact a work that operates on an astonishing number of different levels.